Welcome back, guys. Chris here. In this video, I want to talk to you about NetSuite, which is a third-party application for NetSuite that provides portal access into the system. So what do we even mean by that? Really, there's three main categories where you can utilize a portal. So first off, there are customer portals. So separate from a full e-commerce website where people go in and shop and buy things, a customer portal is just a place where they can log in and they can get some basic information and have some kind of functionality. Oftentimes looking at things like invoices, their orders, when they're going to arrive, maybe even put in new orders or handle their billing. Customer portal, very, very simple login access point. Then you have the second major area you would have for portals would be employee portals. The easiest comparative on that would be NetSuite's Employee Center, which is really a portal for your internal employees. And you're going to see later in this video, I'll show you what NetSuite's employee portal looks like, and I'll explain why you might want to use that portal as opposed to just sticking with the Employee Center. And then the third major category of portal would be for partners. And there's lots of different types of partners you may have. So you could have partners that sell your product, and so they get commissions for that. So they can have a portal they can log into. They can provide you leads on that portal or follow up on their commissions. You might have partners that are suppliers. So you want a place that they can log in and see the orders from you that they need to fulfill. So overall, between those three categories, there's a lot of different uses for portals. And frankly, you may not just have one use. You might need customer portals and employee and partner portals all combined. So NetSuite gives you the capability of having all of these different things. So without really describing it further, let's actually just jump into the system so you get a concept of what this function looks like. Okay, so here we are. This is the login page for the customer portal. I'm going to show you the customer portal and the employee portal, but we're going to start off with the customer portal, which is the most requested type. And this is basically where people are going to log in, your customers, right? Let's assume as a company, we are ABC company, and this is going to be our customers logging in. So this is going to be the page that they come onto. They can put in their contact info, which obviously you'll provide for them. So they would come in here and hit login. And we're going to take a look at what this portal looks like. So obviously it pops up here. I'm going to close these tabs here on the left just to give a bit of a cleaner profile that we're looking at here. So obviously we're brought to a dashboard. This is the first thing the customers see when they log in. And then as with many websites similar to this, we've got a taskbar on the left where we can kind of see a root system of where we can go into the system. And we can come over here. Let's dive into purchases, starting with purchase history. So we'll click on that. It brings us to this page where we can see the entire list of orders that we as the customer, which in this case, it looks like we're Smith Inc., all of the orders we've had with ABC Company. So we've got all the orders here, the dates for them, of course, us as the customer, the amounts. Let's dive into one of these orders. We've got this sales order number 179. If we click on that, it loads this order with all the basic information. We can even see the payment terms, etc., bill to information, shipping info, the breakdown of what the price is actually composed of. Coming down here, we can even see all the various items, images for those, including the SKU number for that item that it can be identified by, the quantity, amount, etc. One thing I really want to point out here, and I'm going to reiterate this many times probably over the course of this video, is that everything you're seeing here, keep in mind, this is a demo account that I'm showing you right now, a demo environment for NetSuite. This is not a real customer account. So what we're seeing here, this can all be customized. And the way that this works, to really understand, NetSuite is providing a portal into NetSuite. So any information that sits in NetSuite is providable and can be brought into NetSuite, into this customer portal that we're looking at here. So every single one of these, if I decided I want to add a new column in here, really what we're looking at here is this is a saved search that exists in NetSuite. So great, you would just need to add an additional results column to provide, whatever you want. If you had a SKU for ABC Company, but also a SKU that the customer, I'm Smith Inc. in this case, I have my own SKU that I know this item as, you could provide that column in there as well. You could provide memos or additional descriptions, whatever you want. Any field, piece of information, or even functionality that exists in NetSuite can all be brought over into NetSuite. So for example, NetSuite has the ability to take a quote and turn it into an order. That functionality is replicatable in NetSuite because it's just an extension of NetSuite. So have that viewpoint as you go through the system. If you ever wonder to yourself, hey, this might be useful for us, but we would need to have this added. Well, if NetSuite can provide that information or that functionality, it can be done within Entry Point. So I will reiterate that many times, but always keep that in mind. So what we're seeing here, we've got various things related to this particular order. Let's move on now to quotes. As I just referenced, we can have all of the various quotes that this customer has received. He would be able to look at it here. So if maybe he gets a quote and then decides later that he wants to now actually act on that quote, we've got this top one here. Let's say he clicks on this and says, great, I want to now trigger that. He has the option right here at the top to then turn this from a quote into an order. One additional thing I want to point out with this is if you are using a NetSuite system with configure price quote, also known as CPQ, where CPQ is generating quotes for customers, again, because CPQ is really just an extension system to NetSuite. So anything that CPQ generates, that then gets saved as a quote in the NetSuite system. Well, that means that can be pulled in here. So as CPQ is generating those quotes, those can all just immediately be linked in to then populate here as quotes that people can take a look at, go, okay, good, I'm ready to act on that. Or maybe we can get a 10% discount on that. Okay, good, place the order. You can see here, we've got the items. They can see what's listed here. If there was discounts included, those would all be included as information. You would just have to add in those additional fields. And then of course, returns. So if a customer has, let's say they order something every week from your company, and then at certain points they go, okay, we got too many items or not the right items, we want to return those. They could initiate returns here. So you would simply, if this was a requirement you wanted, you could add a button saying generate new return. You would be able to link that to an order that you had received. Again, this is as the customer, and then basically put that return through. And also as part of that, the customer can provide information into this customer portal that then feeds back into NetSuite. It is a two-way street where NetSuite can understand, okay, good, the customer has now officially shipped that item. We expect to return that or receive it at whatever specific date based on the shipping method. So this is all useful information flowing both ways. This is for the purchase section. If we close this, we can come here to billing. So this is a very commonly included feature for most customer portals where if they are making orders, they want to be able to see what their balance is. So they can come in here, they can take a look at all the invoices they've had with the major company, ABC company in this case, including not just each invoice, but also what does that mean for their balance? So as they're doing returns, they might have credit going on account and then a new order comes in and then that's going to minus against that total account balance. If they wanted to look at particular specific invoices, they could come in here, they go, great, why is this invoice higher than we were expecting? They could open this up, get all the specific information. Again, any additional field they want to add in here, they can see what's included in that invoice. If they wanted to also make a payment for that invoice, this particular demo account is not configured that way, but it is a common request to have a payment option where all within the same portal, they can simply put in their credit card information and pay it as necessary. This demo account is set up where they would then have to send in a check for that invoice. And then of course, invoices are on a transaction by transaction basis, but also if you have monthly statements that go out that combined all the invoices for that month, as well as anything outstanding from previous month, depending on the payment terms, you would have their statements listed out here that they can see everything grouped together. So that's from a billing standpoint. Then moving on from that, we have cases. So just like NetSuite has basic support case functionality, all of that information and that functionality can be brought in here. So the customers, without having to call in, they can simply come in here and say, good, new case. So if we open up one of these cases, we can see they can put in all the basic information. They can say, this is what we're having a problem with. This is the specifics of it, et cetera, et cetera. And then you, on your side, from a NetSuite standpoint, your support representatives will see these cases generated in the NetSuite system, and they can follow their normal procedure to respond to them, whether through email, calls, et cetera, and handle those cases. So you can see we have all the basic information for that. We can also see a log of all the communication. So just like you have what are called tasks in NetSuite, you can see phone calls, emails, etc. You can have all of that then cycled in here. So even the customer can tell what's happened back and forth between them and, in this case, ABC customer. So the customer can look at this. This is at obviously a case level now, and they can see. Now, all of these in this demo account, these are all closed, but if there were certain ones that are still open, the customer doesn't have to have a separate system to keep track of this. It's all provided right here. And of course, in your NetSuite system, you'd be able to see everything that's happening for that customer as well. So very, very helpful to have all this in here. And of course, lastly, you have your settings. In this particular demo account, there's really not that much to put in here. It's got your basic information, email under here, order preferences. It's really just got the address for this particular company. So you can see that here. But if you do have an account set up where you've got your payment information saved in here, this is where you'd be able to put in what is your preferred credit card or payment method, etc. You can have that all saved in here. The last thing I want to point out is if you're dealing with a NetSuite account that has field service management. So let's say as ABC company, we sell and service printing machines, like larger commercial printing machines. So the customer not only can come in here and order more printing or paper or whatever they're dealing with, but also they have this asset called, this large printer that they have in their office. They can have that as an additional tab here. So they can track it as an asset. They can see when does it need to be serviced, what is some basic information about it. You can even have an entire documentation tab. So if you've got, in NetSuite, you've got your file cabinet, you have all the basic documentation about all your various printers, etc. You can simply link that in here so that the customer can go into this one portal and see, oh, this is how I can do my own servicing or, maybe quick fixes, etc. to my printer, or even the warranty contract, the service agreement, all of these different things that can all be provided there. And then if they want to see when is the technician going to arrive, well, that information is going to be kept in field service management. And because that's field service management, which is part of NetSuite, that all feeds into the system, that can be then put into Entry Point. So all of this can be included in, even if you have these other software like FSM, CPQ, it can all be brought in together with Entry Point. So this is a great example of a customer portal, but now let's take a look at a common example for an employee portal. So I have one open up here. We'll click on that. And I did it with a different color display just so you can get a clear difference of one is a customer portal, one is an employee center, or an employee portal, I should say. What we're dealing with here in this demo account example, this is, let's say, a trucking company. So we ship cars to people all across the United States, and our truckers that have, you've probably seen these flatbed trucks that have 2 levels, so they can put maybe 8 or 9 cars on there, and then they go to these various locations. That trucker needs to be able to have a tablet or some kind of device so they can see what do they need to do as part of their shipment. Maybe it's a 3-day shipment. So this trucker can come into this employee portal and they can see, all right, my routes, what are the also available routes? So if they finish up their routes early, what are the additional routes that they can take? If they're now in Tennessee, are there any available routes that are near the Tennessee area? And they can simply pick those up and move on with that. And then of course, all the available routes. So those are everything, including routes that are already taken by other employees. If you wanted them to not be able to see other people's routes, you could of course limit that depending on the situation, because these are all fields and information that exists in the NetSuite system. You can filter all that moving over into Entry Point. So if I was the trucker, I can come in here and say, great, I want to take a look at my routes for the day. It looks like I've got these 2 routes. I want to take a look at the first one I have up. And we've got some basic information in here. There was other fields, which no doubt you would want to have additional fields put in here, giving the trucker exact information that they need to execute for their job. All of that can easily be populated in here, and they can see they've got these, it looks like 6 addresses that they need to hit as part of this particular route. Now, like I said, you can add additional columns in here. So in this particular case, it's set up in this demo account that they finish all the routes and then they mark it all as complete. But you can add a column in here with check boxes. So they go, great, I just finished that one. Now I finished this one, or even I finished this one and now I'm going to put a little description of what occurred, or add in the like if he has to take an image of the signature of the customer saying they received that thing, those could all be added in here very simply. And then backing out of this is my routes, but if I want to take a look at available routes and go, great, I've just finished my routes for the day, I want to take an additional one, I can come in here and I can hit grab route, assigning that one now to me. So this is an example for a trucker, but there are so many different opportunities when it comes to these employee portals. We're dealing with truckers right now. It could be service technicians like an HVAC repairman. It might be engineers, really anyone that you have out in the field that's not at a desktop location. That would be someone you might want to have on an employee portal. And it might be doing things that are specific to their job. It just might be expense reports or travel information, things that they're going to be inputting. And like I said earlier, Oftentimes what you would do with that, generally, you would do that on an employee center, but no doubt you've taken a look at NetSuite's employee center. It can tend to be difficult for people that are not already familiar with NetSuite because it's a very NetSuite look and feel to it. And for people that are not generally good with computers, that can be a little bit daunting, hard to navigate or deal with. So you can use a bit of a cleaner UI, easier to deal with for your average technician that's going to be out in the field. Not to mention the mobile app for NetSuite, as is infamously known for anyone who's had to deal with it, can be a very difficult app to work with. So this is a cleaner thing that you can have on a tablet, phone, etc., and they can deal with this portal instead of having to deal with that employee center. Additional thing you should think with, when we were on the customer center, I brought up the fact that you can have field service management information tied into the customer portal, but you can also have it from an employee standpoint. So if you've got field service management, now usually your employees that are dealing with field service management, they would have the app on their phone and that's where they would log into. But there's instances, such as with subcontractors, that you might not want to give access into the FSM system, where you could give them access to a pretty limited portal. You might also have a limit in terms of the number of licenses that you have. So you still have other contractors that you want to be able to look at certain things dealing with field service management, but you're out of licenses or you don't want to pay for more licenses. You could utilize an employee center for that kind of thing. A lot of different circumstances where it could come in handy. So that is the employee center. Now, I don't have a demo example of a partner center, but I think you get the concept of how you could configure that depending on the circumstance. So now let's actually dive into NetSuite just to give a quick understanding of what's happening here and what that's going to look like in your main NetSuite account. So if I come over here, I'm in my NetSuite account, and this is where I have entry point set up. So I've got it here under lists, custom, entry point configuration, and we have entry point roles here. Okay, so here, before we get into roles, let's take a look at the configuration first. So what we're looking at here is all of the different portals that we have open. So you can make as many portals as you want. These last two, the one that's called My Account and Truck Demo, these are the two that we were just looking at in the actual portals themselves. So let's take a look at one of these. We've got My Account. So this was the customer portal. And this is basically where you would come in and you would set up. Obviously, the first implementation would be done to initially configure all of this. But if you wanted to come in and go, hey, I want to make a quick fix to my customer center, I want to add an additional column field, etc., whatever you want to do, this is where you would come in and say, I want to add additional navigation. I want to come in, put in new pages, or maybe for this particular page of invoices, you can see this is a list. I want to change that list. I want to change the save search. You can click on that page. It'll show you the exact save search that's being drawn from. You simply open up that save search, you add in a new results column. It's all as simple as that. It's really just as simple as the normal customizations that you would be doing in NetSuite. So if you've ever watched my videos on customizations like custom forms, fields, etc., it's the same thing. You just customize, add in those new fields, link them up to the various fields you want to pull the information from, and that's really it. So the reason that's particularly notable, because that might sound normal, NetSuite has pretty easy customization, so does Entry Point. The funny thing is though, all the comparative software that you can use in this instance, so if you're dealing with, let's say, even just the Employee Center, or definitely Configure Price Quote, Field Service Management, or the major competitor when dealing with customer portals, which is Suite Commerce Advanced, has a feature called My Account. If you've ever had to customize any one of these software, they are incredibly difficult. They're all different in their own ways and difficult for their own reasons, but you've got to deal with a developer that knows those software. So for example, Suite Commerce Advanced, you've got to get a Suite Commerce Advanced developer to go in and do some pretty tedious customizations just to do something as simple as adding in an additional field. Not the same thing when you're dealing with Entry Point. It's all very, very easily accessible by a general, I would maybe not user, but certainly an administrator who's shown how to work this for about 10 minutes will be able to go in and start customizing things in their own right. You can come in here, you can add additional images, you can limit things in terms of the audiences that can see these, etc. And then if we come here to style, so you'll remember that customer portal was blue. They had some different shades of blue. You've got some really simple you could say cosmetic controls here. So if you want to change secondary, primary, or tertiary colors, you can come here under the advanced theme editor. If you know things like JavaScript or CSS, you can actually go in and get a little bit more creative with the visual element for your portals. But in general, I would keep in mind that these portals are not e-commerce websites, and you're not making an Apple store here that you want to look really, really flashy. These things are generally pretty simple in terms of their design and layout. So that is a limitation that you should keep in mind. So that is it in terms of how you would configure it. It was just an overview level. I'm not trying to get into a whole tutorial in terms of how you would implement this. The next thing I want to point out though, is if we come up here to roles, you can see all the roles that have been created in relation to your portals. Now, to explain what I even mean by that, I actually want to jump out of NetSuite and go on to my next section. So at this point, I want to talk a little bit more generally about some additional features in relation to entry point. And of course, the thing I was just commenting on was the addition of roles. So let's give an example here. Let's say you're dealing with a customer portal and Smith Inc., that company, they don't just have one employee that's going to be going onto that customer portal. They're going to have 4. They've got a purchaser as well as 3 accounts payable personnel. Now, those roles are very different. The purchaser needs the ability to make new orders, whereas the accounts payable personnel have to have the ability to actually pay the bills. And you don't want to mix those functions. You don't want the purchaser to be able to go in and start paying bills, or potentially even see the bills. So what you can do is you can set up roles in the system very simply, just like you can do with normal NetSuite functionality, because again, this is all just normal NetSuite functionality. And you can provide that to your customer. You can have 10 different roles and permissions for these, even really just one particular customer, so that the purchasers can go in, maybe the accounts payable guys got their thing, there can be sales reps that have their commissions, etc. No matter what the role is, you can link in whatever access and information they're going to be seeing when they go into, in this particular case, the customer portal. You can do the same thing with the employee portal, partner portal, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one additional feature to think with. Another point to bring up is something I did reference a little bit earlier, but just to make it very clear, you can have, once you've paid for entry points, there's obviously an initial implementation fee, and then there's an annual subscription. But once you've got it, you can have 1 portal or you can have 1,000 portals. It really doesn't matter. As many portals as you want. So if you know you have 15 customer portals that are needed, plus you need 2 employee portals, and you've got a partner portal, that's all totally fine. There's not going to be any additional fee, no matter how many portals you're trying to create. And then the third additional feature I want to comment on is specifically with the employee portal. If you know you have a lot of employees or contractors, subcontractors, etc., that need to be able to access into a employee portal, using entry points employee portal as opposed to just going with the employee center can be a very cost-effective method of having a large amount of employees coming in, because the way they handle those licensing is a little bit different. So keep that in mind. If you know you're dealing with many, many different people and you've had problems with just the quantity of employee licenses you're dealing with, you may want to look at entry point as an alternative solution. All right, so those are the additional features. Now let's briefly talk about the entry point pros and cons. Most of these points I've already talked about in this video, so we'll move through this pretty quickly, starting with the pros. First off, as I said, anything that's in NetSuite, functionality or information-wise, can be utilized in entry point. Secondly, very easy to customize, especially in relation to the other competing options that you would have for portals. Thirdly, the implementation is relatively simple. If everything that I showed you in this demo account throughout this video, if those are the exact things that you want for your system, then it's actually a very quick implementation, probably 10 hours. But there's probably nobody that actually wants that. Everyone has their own specific requirements, customizations, etc., that are needed. I would say a pretty standard implementation that has some customizations and things that are unique about it is probably sitting about 40 hours for an implementation, which is a pretty reasonable amount of time. If you want more, obviously it will go over that, but I've seen a lot of companies start with entry point and just say, great, I want this, this, and this. That takes maybe 30 hours. And then when they have that, they go, ooh, can you also add these additional 10 different things? And then you might be looking at another 10 or 20 hours for that. The next positive I want to comment on is the cost. Now, in my videos, I don't get into specific prices, but I will say that at least at the moment that I'm filming this, the cost overall for entry point is very reasonable, and especially when you compare it to something like SuiteCommerce Advanced, which can be pretty pricey. And then the last pro that I want to comment on, as I mentioned earlier, if you've got many different portals you want to deal with, then entry point is not only going to be the cheapest alternative, but it can also be the quickest to implement and the easiest to manage. So those are the pros. Now let's take a look at the cons. So what are the downsides of using entry point? The first and most notable, I would say, is the fact that this is a relatively newer app. It's only existed in the past, I would say, year to 2 year time frame. So as a result of that, when compared to something like SuiteCommerce Advanced or NetSuite's Employee Center, they've been in existence for years, they're much more stable products that have been built out. Entry point is a newer product, so it's not as stable as something alternative. That's not to say that I've seen it have problems in that regard or be buggy or crashing or things like that, but there's just no question. If you've got something that's newer, it's not going to be as robust as one of the dogs that have been around for years and years. And then the second point I would bring up is something I referenced earlier, which is just that the visual capabilities, if you want to make it cosmetically, you want to make your customer center or your partner center or something like that look really nice, there's only so much you can do with it. You can change some basic coloring, you can move the fields around a little bit, but it's not like you can go crazy and have animation coming in when they're coming into their customer portal, etc. It's pretty limited. So as long as you're fine with the basic approach, something that looks nice and modern, but not anything too flashy, then you should be fine. So that's it on my review for entry point. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If so, please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. So with all of that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.